start the meeting. We have about 1 minute to start the meeting. If everyone could please come to the table. Brian, Matt, if you could all come to the table, and then we'll take a proper morning tea break. Yes, it should have been tabled. Okay. Morena, everyone. Good morning. We're just starting our Environment Committee meeting. Thank you, everyone, for coming back to the table. I appreciate you've had a very short break, so we will begin our committee meeting, and then we'll adjourn so you can have a proper cup of tea. I know most of you have got one now. So we're going to begin with our karakia. Can we start with the karakia? And are we being live streamed now? Yeah. Yes, okay. Okay. Tuia ki ronga, tuia ki raro, tuia ki roto, tuia ki waho, tuia te hari tangata, ka ronga te po, ka ronga te ao, humi e, tuia, tai e. Thank you, everyone. I don't have any apologies for this morning. I've had a few people say they have to leave early afternoon, but hopefully we will be finished. Hopefully we will be finished by lunchtime. It is a very small agenda today, and we've had quite a busy week already, so I'm looking forward to this meeting finishing a bit earlier than some of the workshops have during the week. Just to confirm that we're being video streamed, the meeting is being recorded to Council's YouTube channel, and a reminder to everyone to please turn your microphones on before speaking and off when you've finished, and our recommendations will be displayed on both screens. For members' reference, and amendments will be shown in red. If you wish to make an amendment today, please provide the wording in writing beforehand. I haven't had any questions or suggestions that there will be amendments, so hopefully no one has concerns with the recommendation. Updates to the interest register, any conflicts of interest you need to raise today? I don't think so, and we have no public forum. I'm just wondering now, would people like to have a morning tea break now? Yep, so we're just going to adjourn the meeting for, do we need another 10 minutes, 15 minutes? 10. So
we need a little bit of time. So I've only just seen your chairman's report.
Yes.
Just tabled now.
So
a couple of minutes to read that as well.
Okay, so I think we'll adjourn for 15 minutes, which takes us to 5 to 11, and then we'll confirm the minutes and then go through the chairperson's report. And I'm going to invite Joe Martin to join us for the chairperson's report, and Peter and some of her other team, just to share our good news around the Mai Tai successful funding bid. So we're looking forward to having that as a short presentation. All right, so we'll adjourn for 15 minutes now. Thank you, everyone. wrong button. We have everyone, I just like making the beeps. We have everyone back at the table. Matt, you're just coming. I'm not sure where Gail's here, and I'm not quite sure where Trudy's gone, but I'm sure she'll be back in a minute. So we're going to start off with confirmation of the minutes, which is pages 5 to 28 of your agenda. Oh, thank you, Councillor McGurk. Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about the minutes? Mayor Rachel? Not in relation to that matter. Okay, all right. So in that case, I'm going to put that, confirm that the minutes of the meeting of the Environment Committee held on the 28th of May and reconvened on the 4th of June as a true and correct record. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? That's carried. And we're going to move on to the chairperson's report. And I'd like to invite Jo and Peter to come down and join us. So I wanted to use the opportunity today to talk about our recent success in obtaining $1.7 million of funding from central government. The money has come from the Ministry for the Environment Quick Start Public Waterways and Ecosystem Fund. And I want to begin by saying a huge congratulations to Jo, who worked incredibly hard to get this application into the Ministry of Environment during lockdown or during COVID, so you would have been working very hard from home. And this is one of 22 quick start projects across New Zealand, which has been funded by the Ministry as part of the first tranche of the Jobs for Nature program. And Jobs for Nature is a program of work administered by the Ministry of Environment, which aims to stimulate New Zealand post-COVID, and it is intended to provide employment for up to 2,000 people, whilst at the same time addressing major environmental concerns, thus playing a part in creating a regenerative economy. And I think Councillor Courtney touched on this yesterday, that we're one of the few countries, or one of the only countries in the world, which is ensuring that government funding to address the COVID crisis is being used to create positive environmental outcomes at the same time. So aren't we lucky to be living here and to have a government which is forward thinking like that? I think it's really exciting. I'm not going to read out the entire Chair's report. I know it's just been tabled today. Apologies for its lateness. I wonder if anyone, Councillor Edgar? Oh, sorry, I just had a question. Okay, I just wonder if I might let Jo and Peter present briefly first, and then if we have questions with regards to the chairperson's report, that would be really great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've just got a short briefing and then a very short PowerPoint as well with some nice pictures on it, so to show what's already been done. So as the Chair said in her report, the project's part of a $1.3 billion Jobs for Nature initiative, and those funds are being distributed through various channels. The ones that are the most relevant to us are DOC and MFE. And of that pool of 1.3 million, 162 million was set aside for 22 fast track projects, and this is one of those. And we're intending to deliver it jointly through the Science and Environment and Parks teams, working together, which is why Peter's here with me. It's pretty exciting for both teams, and we're really looking forward to getting into it. I have to say, we've started doing a bit of planning already. So the project was chosen by MFE for several reasons. It was because we already had a plan in preparation. It's a very important catchment for the iwi of Te Tauihu. We had already invested in the catchment through Project Mai Tai Mahitahi and have got some existing relationships to work on, and we were able to co-fund it to the tune of $100,000 a year through our existing work program. So those were the reasons that it was chosen. We have already signed now a confirmation of intent to proceed with the Ministry, and they're granting us $25,000 upfront for the rapid recruitment of a project manager, and we're underway with that. And we have until the 8th of October under the milestones that have been set by the Ministry to recruit the project manager, develop the project plan, develop the work plan for this year, and develop an engagement plan. So they're really moving fast, and we're going to move fast too. So the 1.7 million is all for jobs. It's not for buying things or services. It will all get used up for jobs. We estimated 30 FTE over 5 years, and that's been something that's been a little difficult to explain. So that is, it could be 6 people a year, or it could be 2 people, say, in year 1 and 15 in year 2 and 10 in year 3. And as we go through developing the project plan, we'll get a bit more clarity on that. We haven't quite got there yet. And we'll be using existing OPEX and also applying to Billion Trees Fund to get the trees and the other funding we need to buy the things. Mostly Billion Trees Fund for trees, I have to say. Yeah, so we're working on the project plan at the moment, but the overall intent is to build on the work that's already been done, and there's lots of that. So some of you will remember that we had Project Maitai Mahitahi, which was $1.6 million over 4 years, invested by this council, which was a really big investment, and that was focused on water quality in the river. And then we currently have a $1.2 million Hill Country Erosion Fund project from Ministry of Primary Industries, which is focused on erosion prevention in the hill country, and some of that has gone into the Mahitahi catchment as well. And then we have 100,000 a year ongoing through Healthy Streams and Parks existing work programs. So that's quite an impressive level of investment in that catchment, and so in some ways it's not surprising that we were able to get some more funds. We may be able to get some more money, and I don't know yet, it's being decided on, but we've applied for some additional funds through DOC, so we'll just wait and see. I might be able to bring some news. So yeah, it could end up being a very, very big program. So I've got a quick slideshow that I just wanted to show you as a little bit of sort of inspiration, and to show you what the money buys. So we've got, I'm just going to whiz through some of the plantings that have been done over the last few years. So that you can see, because the purpose of this plan, really, we've got a bit of a mosaic of things that have happened up and down the catchment, and we kind of want to join them up together. So I think I probably need, oh, there's the clicker. Right. Do you have anything you wanted to add before I get on to this, Peter?
No, but through the chair, it's an exciting project for both parks and science environment. We've been doing lots of work jointly already in these planting projects and improving that lower river health. So yeah, exciting.
So the catchment obviously runs right up from, you know, the area up behind the dam and the Maitai Water Reserve all the way down to where it meets the sea. This project is not including the Maitai Water Reserve. It kind of starts from the dam and goes down. But so I'm just going to whiz through. So some of these large trees here that were put in when the shared pathway was put in were purchased through one of these projects that we've already discussed, and they're going along really well. We put in an inanga spawning area at Shakespeare Walk, so there's some plantings there that have grown up quite nicely, and the signage, and we did some earthworks there to extend the area. This is a planting where next to the Brook Stream confluence, so there's been some put in the urban area, and we'll be looking for where there's opportunities to do a bit more of that, because it's got a bit more visibility for people as well. But I want to confirm that we will not be removing any existing exotic specimen trees, not intercutting down trees. We'll be augmenting, not cutting down, except with the exception of willows in the river, actually. But even that will be done carefully to make sure that we're not suddenly taking a whole lot of trees out, allowing bank erosion. It'll be staged and it'll be underplanted. Yeah. So that's a park. I think that might have been a Friends of the Maitai planting at Hanby Park. Do you know?
With the community. Yes.
With the community, yeah. This one here is funded through the Te Ururako Memorial Fund. That was a big planting that was done at Bramford Park. That's Ministry of Primary Industries money there. Some of you will remember there was a ford at Almond Tree Flat that was removed as part of Project Mai Tai, and then there's quite a big planting alongside that, Almond Tree Flat Ford. And that's upstream of the ford there, so you can see there's been a lot of plants gone in there, all nicely mulched. We've got quite a few near the Charlins Creek confluence, and Peter was just telling me about something I didn't know about, which is a kahikatea stand. Do you want to mention that?
Yes, through the chair, there's just before the golf course is kahikatea that was planted about 20 years ago, and they have established well. They came away, and then the willows that surrounded them were taken away after they established. So it shows what can be done in that environment.
Yeah, and I just would make a comment there that sometimes people say, why do we put all this investment in what is essentially a floodplain? What happens when it rains and all the plants get removed? And that example that Peter's just given is an example of the fact that, you know, you put the investment in, and so far we haven't lost any of the plants that we put in there. It doesn't mean to say that we couldn't, but I think you can't, if you go there, you'll never put anything in there. So we sort of have to make it's a risk analysis, really. That's where, so there used to be a nursery area on the flats just upstream of the Almond Tree Flats. And so that's the old nursery site. I think there's going to be a bridge going in there at some point across to the Mai Tai track. That is the Groom Creek wetland that was put in through Project Mai Tai a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of planting being done there. Some of it's going really well, and we're putting in new planting. Anyway, if you haven't been there, it's really lovely, peaceful place to go and hang out for a while. What's that, sorry?
It's hard digging.
Yeah, it is hard digging there. So there's some of the older plantings that are there growing up quite nicely on a picnic table. That's brand new planting that's just next to the wetland. And that picture shows the extent of the plantings that's going on right down in the top right-hand corner. You can't see them very well up there actually, but yeah, there's a lot of plantings going in there around that area. Which is good for the Mai Tai camps there, and also it's a popular mountain biking area too. So it's got recreational amenity values as well as biodiversity ones. The Friends of the Mai Tai have got a planting area just there that they've been looking after for about 5-6 years. So we recently funded a sign there about what they've been doing and about some of the biodiversity values around that area. And their plantings are looking completely fabulous. So that's what you get in about 6 years. It's its own little bush. And again, I recommend going and having a walk in there if you don't. And they've done it all by themselves with community help. Council has provided some mulch and the plants, and they've done it. So yeah, it's a great effort. That's a bit further up of the camp, some plantings there by the Horseshoe Bridge. And this is up at the reservoir, so you can see the little gazebo thingy in the background, and then looking up towards the spillway there. And the last photo is a community planting on some of the retired land that's being retired forestry land, doing a big planting up there at the top of above the Mai Tai Dam. So that was just a quick tour of what's already happened in the Mai Tai, so we're going to be working to join those things up.
Thank you, Jo. Gosh, there's a lot. There's a lot that's been done in that in those 4 years, and I think it's a really great example as well of how much the community can do when we foster those partnerships and support them with the plants and the sites and amazing outcomes. I have questions from Gail, Rachel, Matt, then Tim, then Judine, and then Mel.
Thank you. My question relates around Rotary programs and the celebration of 100 years. And if I snapped you, were you going to ask that? Mel? No, okay. Are there opportunities for that, for clubs to be involved in planting trees? We've got a target to reach, and we could probably like your help in that.
Through the chair, one of the first roles of the project manager that we're recruiting will be to reach out to anybody and everybody who might like to be involved in this project. As well as creating jobs, there's an opportunity for collaborating with community groups and iwi on the delivery of it. Yes.
Can you put us all on the list? There are a few clubs represented around the table. Thanks through the chair. Wonderful chairperson's report. I'd be happy to move that.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'd really like to, hi Joe and Peter. I'd really like to acknowledge the amazing work that your teams are doing in this space and also in successfully receiving the funding. That's fantastic. I'm just curious as to whether you think this, because we have this investment in the Maitai ecological restoration project and the other funding that we're receiving, if this is a good time for us to be kind of taking a broader cross-council look at what else we could be doing to protect and restore the health of the Maitai River and our freshwater catchment. So do you feel like this is a good time to be taking that kind of view?
Through the chair, I think that there's a focus nationally on improving freshwater. And so yes, it is a good time to be looking at improving freshwater, and there's new policy coming down the line, you know, to help us do that. So any work that you do in the catchment will usually improve the health of the water, but maybe not directly. So within this project, there's a riparian sub-project which will shade the river and help with the temperature and also slow down runoff off the land. But if we're doing work on the hill country with erosion prevention as well, then yes, so we are with this project taking a look at the whole catchment, but it would be fair to say the focus of this bit is on the land, given that it will probably have benefits for the river.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So great stuff, obviously. I was wondering, we had a bad drought, was it 2 summers ago? And a whole lot of plantings, like heaps of plantings died. Where are we at, through the chair, today in terms of net gain, net loss, given what we've put in and what we lost?
Yes, through the chair. Obviously plants, various types of plants are suited to more moisture than others. We put in a combination of our plantings. Normally we allow something like 20% loss through various causes. We're endeavouring to get canopy closure as soon as possible. Normally a 3-year period is what we're aiming at. So we did lose some species. Some species were more vulnerable than others. Those that know natives, the broadleaf, the Grosselenia, was quite badly affected, and a lot of our beeches and totara were quite badly affected. So it's a matter of looking what the mix of those species range. So I think the losses were high, but not unexpected.
So through the chair, have we got net gain though, given what we lost, given what we've put in the ground since then?
Through the chair, I think we certainly have net gain. It's been 2 hard years, but I think though in the areas, certainly the Maitai, where you do have wetter soil conditions, we didn't have as many losses as we did in some of our lowland hill country.
Right, and through the chair, any idea of the size of that net gain? Just so we've got a sense of where we're at. Through the chair, sorry, I haven't got a. No worries. We haven't had failures of our planting, a total failure of a planting, so it's a gain. Okay, thank you. And also through the chair, I've been really pleased to see the protectors, the covers that go around the new plantings over recent times change from core flute to biodegradable cardboard. Has that actually been a decision, and that you're sticking with cardboard, or are we still using mix? What's happening with those covers? Through the chair, we have gone to the pressed cardboard. Suddenly we were planting plants near river systems with obviously plastic sleeves on. A flood comes along and we ended up scraping them off to Furna Beach. So that's really not something that's sustainable. So we have pretty well all our plantings have been done in the
M-Guards, which are a Nelson firm that manages that production.
Yeah, and I believe one of the people behind that company used to be a Nelson City Councillor, Jan Fryer, former Nelson City Councillor Jan Fryer. So that's a great story. Thank you. My last question through the chair is you talked about the inanga spawning area that was created. Are inanga merrily spawning in that part of town?
Yes, apparently so. Yeah, we go and monitor them, and you'll know that they're there when you see the herons and shags and well, mostly herons and shags actually hanging around there because they
Having
like
lunch?
to feed on them. Yes, that's right. So we did the first year. We looked at all of these lovely inanga merrily spawning there and all sorts of all the birds and thought, did we do this right? But on the whole, I think we're getting net gain there as well.
More net gain.
Yeah.
I love net gain and
actually,
cardboard.
Through the chair, may I add something about your question about net gain?
Sure.
I just wanted to say that with the with some of the funding that we get, and particularly the Billion Trees funding or the MPI funding, they usually have a plant survival target of around 80%. So although we can't answer today exactly what the net gain is for the plants that are funded through those projects, it will be at least 80% survival. And also we've been working with the University of Canterbury to get some science about drought resistant plants. We're thinking that this might be a problem over time. And so we're looking at how we might optimize our planting lists for drought resistant plants, and also perhaps over the next, decade, moving into plants that are perhaps more suited to a warmer climate.
Right. Can I just say thank you very much for that? I just want to add, I think plantings are like citizenship ceremonies. Everyone likes plantings. Like I have never once got an email from someone saying, damn you, Nelson City Council, stop doing all those plantings. So it's really nice to have news about something we're doing that everyone enjoys and appreciates. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you for that. No, that's all very cool. And it's got the 30 full-time jobs, so that's over 5 years, so it might be 6 jobs a year. Is that reading all right? And of course, we've got a council project manager, and the people physically planting the trees, would they be like someone like Nelmac would be employing? Is that right?
Through the chair, yes, we'll have a contractor doing the delivery. So the project manager will be in charge of all the reporting up to the government agencies that are involved.
Yep.
And building the relationships that I spoke about, the community relationships and iwi relationships, and coordinating the whole thing really. And then we'll have a contractor who's doing the delivery. And just to note that actually the majority of those roles will probably not be in planting, at least not for the first year, because we've got to grow the plants.
Okay.
We didn't know this was coming.
Okay.
So there'll be site preparation and quite a lot of weed work as well, which is great because as Councillor Laurie said, everybody loves planting. Nobody loves weeding very much. And also companies or organisations that fund community projects tend to prefer to fund plantings because there's something nice at the end of it, and they don't fund weeding. So it's fabulous that this fund funds weeding.
Cool. So and sorry to come away. So I love natives, but then also have a soft spot for some exotics. It's beautiful in the autumn going up the Maitai. So it's nice to see that you're going to retain. Will you be sort of building on that? I mean, it's beautiful in the autumn. It's the colours are phenomenal, and they're not natives, obviously.
Through the chair, with the Hill Country Erosion Fund money, sometimes we use exotics because they hold the soil better.
Yep.
So it will depend on the purpose of what we're doing. The ones next to the river will probably be natives because they're better for the ecosystem.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
but up in the hills, if there's erodible spots, we might look at other ones.
Cool. And running on that, I'm always impressed how self-seeding sometimes gets the best plants in the right place. You get the genetic information on the plants that actually like that little ecosystem. So I sometimes get concerned about when we try to meddle too much in planting and weeding and planting, and it can be a hard, expensive process. But of areas where we can use that money just to sort of let things naturally, a bit of gorse takes off, but that's usually a great nursery for the totara, etc. Or are we just going to be completely sort of clearing things out in blank canvas?
Through the chair, some of the forestry retirement areas are basically that, allowing natural revegetation to occur. We just need to manage the weeds that come up in that environment, such as banana passion fruit, almost beard, which can circumvent that natural process.
So for personally myself, a good balance of that. And I know we might get a bit of pushback, things look a bit scruffy, but in the long term could be great. The Mahi Tahi Mai Tai, is that also going to be including the tributaries? I'm talking about the brook, Charlins coming off it.
Through the chair, that the focus will be around the main river catchment, but yes, absolutely. We're interested in the brook, in particular for pest plant control.
Yep.
Up the brook. There's probably more opportunity for pest plant control up the brook than up the Mai Tai, particularly accessible. So some of the work that needs doing really needs experienced contractors because it's on very steep land and difficult to get at. So we're also looking for accessible areas for these new roles because the people won't be very highly trained initially.
So my feedback, we keep an eye on, obviously I live up brook and notice the changes in the water, etc. And I often see where the two join, you can see a coloration. And personally, I've noticed quite a severe drop in water quality in the brook due to various reasons. And I know we've made some great gains, but if that can still be kept in that mix, if it's part of the scope of what we're doing there. But no, all very good. And then the fruit trees, a lot of stuff we already do very well. I know for the last 20 years, yourself, Peter and team have been doing. So this is really adding on to what we already do. It's not a change of direction, it's adding on, supplementing what we do there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Next, I have Councillor Edgar, then Councillor Courtney, then Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thank you for that. Just in relation to the jobs, firstly, how do we know it will be creation of new roles rather than just existing?
Through the chair, I said we would have a delivery contractor. It would be a requirement of the contract that it's not done by existing staff, that there are the creation of those jobs.
Right. And so 30 FTE was what was set in the application, what we said would ensure was delivered.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And just following up from Councillor Laurie was asking about the plant protectors. I saw use of core, if I'm getting the pronunciation, recently. Would they be an even more environmentally friendly product to use? Because they're a natural fibre.
The core flute, I think you're talking about.
No, as in the, was it the coconut?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, COIR. Certainly not core flute, no.
It is supplied from overseas suppliers and can be purchased through Christchurch suppliers. We've gone for a cardboard product because it's the same scenario. It's New Zealand produced and it's supplied by local contractors.
But environmentally, is there any difference between the two?
No, both will biodegrade in the environment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Joe and Peter, thank you very much for the report. Excellent. You must feel very proud of the job you're doing and the support you're getting from central government as well. Joe, you did say to Councillor Edgar, the delivery contractor. I make a plea to you today that you, wherever possible, you put an emphasis on people and the community. There's 2,000 jobs here, and I just don't want it sort of farmed out to, as much as I rank NELMAC, I do want to have it with a community emphasis so that people can be taken on the journey and get pleasure from it as well. So my plea is please try and involve the community in a lot of this, as much of this as you possibly can, because I think there'll be benefits all around then.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Councillor O'Neill-Stevens.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Peter. I mean, firstly, if you're looking for labour, we've got 13 fairly able-bodied people around here, low cost. It's great to hear that riparian margin is getting some much needed love, and that we're addressing some of those challenges like river temperature and getting rid of those willows. Firstly, in terms of those, the retention of exotic trees, looking long term, do you imagine, especially if we see sort of stabilization in terms of those levels of erosion, is your sort of long-term vision for the Maitai, for Mahitahi, to be sort of fully restored with the removal of them?
Through the chair, that's a hard question. Obviously, there are some aggressive exotic species that are ideal for pressure points in a river system. So willows, for example, have a really good spreading base stabilisation scenario. For a kahikatea to get to that stage, we're probably looking at 100 years. So I don't think you would want to retire them immediately. We can certainly remove the smaller trees and areas where there isn't those pressure points, but I think you would be into having some of these trees, exotic trees in space for quite a long time.
Thanks. And then in terms of that, again, sort of looking ahead, we're seeing this big investment. What do you view as the sort of the next big challenges to address for the health of the Maitai? If you had to pick one or two, I'm sure you've got a very long list, but.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I might start this. Peter might have something to add after. Climate change actually is right up there because of its impact on flows, both droughts and high flow events, and water temperature. So if we're just talking about the health of the river, although that's probably true for the health of the land too, as we just discussed droughts before. So a changing climate, and it might come with biosecurity issues as well. So as the water temperature changes and we have more extreme conditions, that might leave the door open for pests that we don't currently have. So we're putting quite a lot of thinking into biosecurity at the moment also. Yeah, that's probably what's mostly on our radar. Yeah, I think. Do you have anything to add to that?
No, through the chair, probably the most unstable part of the Maitai catchment are our cropping scenarios on pine trees. So we're obviously forestry has an impact on water quality that flows into the Maitai. So potentially a retirement of forestry would have the most stabilising effect on the Maitai, but that's not necessarily practical and we don't actually own some of that land. So, but you asked for it.
Okay.
May I add something to your question about long-term vision? We are thinking quite a lot about the right tree in the right place. So it depends on the purpose. So as I've said, putting trees in that will hold the soil in erodible areas. But we're also going to perhaps be thinking about carbon sequestration in time as well. So although the restoration might be predominantly native, a mixed plantings might turn out to be able to get the biodiversity gains that we're after, but also do some other things for us as well. So I don't know what the long-term vision is, but that's what we're thinking about.
Thank you, Councillor.
One quick more,
Yes,
if you'll indulge me.
And then I have a couple of questions.
Thanks. Just in terms of that impact of forestry, I'm guessing, but please correct me, would the biggest issues from that be that sort of erosion and sort of filtering through down into the river and nutrient runoff? Is there any other big ones we see from those forestry blocks?
Through the chair, I think you've covered most of it. The importance of this plantings we're doing is providing that additional filtering of that, knowing it's a reality, and having to suppress those sediments coming off by good planting around our stream margins and our river.
Thanks, and great work, and maybe it's time for a bigger conversation.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe and Peter. I just had a couple of follow-up questions with regards to some of the other questions councillors asked. In terms of the plant survival target and knowing that we're having sort of slightly dry summers, particularly the last 2 summers, we recently developed a water policy, I think, with Alex's team. Did you have some input into that in terms of ensuring that newly planted plants get some watering or some attention during times of drought? Right.
Through the chair, not that I can recall. Our tree plantings do concentrate on those higher value specimens. If we're planting a revegetation project, it is ensuring their survival by the use of mulches, use of plant guards, and use of the right species mixed going into the soil conditions that we're planting. So we wouldn't want to be watering those type of plants.
And through the chair, just to add, the parks manager was involved in that.
I thought she was. I guess I just wondered if, because you did say that you're trying to preserve some of the indigenous plant species which were there originally, and I guess some of them might be more vulnerable if there isn't the original canopy to sort of get them through times when it's quite hot, sunny days. So how do you, if you've lost maybe a high number of a particular species, but you want that species to be retained, do you go back the following year and replant once you've got, or a few years later once you've got that canopy established?
Yes, through the chair, that's correct. A lot of the time, we plant the first generation plants and then supplement plant with the shelter and shade that they have created by putting matai, totara, kahitea in that environment. Sometimes we use the exotic trees that remain, knowing that they'll be phased out to give it that initial 2-3 year establishment period, and then the exotic plants to remove.
Great. And in terms of your nursery plants that you're planting now, are you using locally sourced seeds from the area?
For the chair, yes, that's correct. The Maitai and its catchment are used for a lot of the seed that's collected by not only the Nelmat nursery but other nurseries. So it will be endemic seed stocks from those areas, yes.
Okay. And I've got 2 more questions. In terms of the Billion Trees project and I guess emission targets and keeping, I presume you're keeping account of how many trees survive or how many trees we're planting. How could council, and it might be a conversation for Chris Cameron as well, if council's trying to offset some of its existing emissions through its own planting, how would we begin to line that up? Because at the moment we're doing a lot of planting, but we don't say this counts as carbon credits in terms of Indigenous planting. How would we line that up, and what's your thinking?
Through the chair, this is a work in progress. I would have to say it's really technically complicated, and I'm not going to be able to answer your question directly right now because I'm still learning about that myself, to be honest. Okay. So we're talking with Chris Cameron. We know there's an opportunity there. We haven't honestly worked out how to join those things up yet.
How to line them up. Well, I'm really looking forward to that because I think it's an important part of council's work, that if we know that this is our greenhouse gas emissions and waste or whatever, but actually this is our gain in planting, then that's a really big plus for council. Effectively, we don't have to pay someone else to do the planting if we're doing it in-house, and so I look forward to that piece of work being done. And then finally, in terms of forestry and future, sort of bigger picture thinking, Jo, you and I talked about that briefly, how beginning a conversation perhaps through the biodiversity forum on which pieces of forestry plantation would be best to retire first. And so maybe you could just, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens and Councillor Sanson have asked questions about that in the past. How would we begin to understand which forestry blocks are the most important to retire in terms of erosion and sedimentation and the health of the river?
Through the chair, I suppose that comes back to my right tree in the right place thing. So there's quite a lot of technical work about land stability and working out which are erodible soils and that sort of thing. So as the science comes through, as the science, as we gain more knowledge about that for our land, we'll be able to make more informed decisions there. So that's about the soil structure and the geology of it. And then there's the biodiversity side, where some sites perhaps are adjacent to higher biodiversity value sites, and then there's the question about which pieces of land are going to be suitable for restoration. Restoring retired forestry land to natives is expensive and difficult and long term. And so there's going to be a period of time where the root balls of the original pine trees degrade before the natives have come up. So there's quite a bit of thinking that needs to go into which sites should be retired. And there's quite a bit of focus on that at the moment. Okay. So I wouldn't like to make a comment about which those are, but just letting you know that those are the things that are being thought about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got two more questions. In terms of when you're planting, considering for bird-friendly and bee-friendly planting, are you bringing that into the picture as well, particularly around bees, which aren't native, but is that part of?
Through the chair, yes, that's part of the scenario, that we have nectar and berry producing native plants as part of those corridor plantings, and that's what we've probably done along our river system, so that we can draw bird population out of the catchment reserves into the city.
Okay, and in terms of some of the steeper area, like the potential for Manuka to produce Manuka honey, I guess I'm particularly thinking around when you're retiring forestry, that's an important new regenerative industry. Are those conversations being had as well, the potential of Manuka honey industry?
Through the chair, so actually we have a visiting expert here today who's works nationally on looking at retired forestry blocks and land use. That's a land management area which is growing right throughout the country. Land managers used to be thought of as people in gumboots talking to dairy farmers, but as sustainable land use is becoming more and more of a conversation, we also are having that conversation more and more. So Manuka is one sustainable land use. There are a variety of others, and I guess, sorry for the theme, but I think it comes back to that question of right tree and right place again as well.
Yeah, great.
So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was a really excellent opportunity for councillors to learn more about what the funding means at an operational level. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I think I had Councillor Sampson move the chairperson's report. I guess I should check in case anyone has any questions of me, but I don't think so. I think that you will ask questions through to Joe and Peter, which was great. Does anyone want to second the report? Councillor Bywater. Thank you so much, Joe and Peter, and we look forward to having that work progress. It's a really exciting outcome and fantastic for the Environment Committee to hear good news. Yeah, like Councillor Laurie says, no one seems to get upset when we plant trees, so that's yeah. Yeah, I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour? Oh, yeah, yes, debate. Councillor Sampson? She just wants to say something, so that's fine.
I'm able to have an opportunity to say something. It was really great to hear from the officers' questions, also from councillors O'Neill Stevens and Fulton. So I would, I guess there is a considerable body of science that attributes clear-cut plantation forestry as a major cause of excessive sediment in the Maitai River and likely other tributaries in the catchment. As Chair of Governance and Finance, Council's commercial forestry operation sits under the delegation and oversight of my committee. Council's commercial forestry is undertaken on public land belonging to the people of Nelson. I guess it is what I would call marginally profitable at best, with a net return averaged over the last 15 years of just $200,000 per annum. It operates in a closed account, and so it arguably brings no financial benefit to the city's ratepayers, but considerable cost in terms of the environmental impacts and a cost to remedy these, and lost recreational and economic development opportunity. So we are going to be reviewing the activity management plan for forestry as part of our long-term plan deliberations. So I'm going to be requesting a true cost benefit analysis of council's commercial forestry that considers, among many other aspects, the costs of mitigating environmental impacts such as sedimentation on the Maito River, with a view to us having a robust and informed discussion about whether we should be considering retirement of council's commercial forestry into permanent forests to benefit the freshwater catchments, the environment, biodiversity, recreational use, and broader economic development benefits to the community from alternative uses of this land if it were in permanent forest. I hope that undertaking this analysis and review will be good news to the environment team, and I support the great work and will support the great work being done to protect and restore the health of our waterways. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Councillor Sanson. I appreciate that is it's a slight variation to the chairperson's report, but I think what you're touching on is that we have $1.6 million being invested into the health of our river. And if we're serious about the health of our river, how do we expand that work yet again? We've already spent 4 years working on the health of our river with a 1.7 million. I might not have no, I've got the numbers around the wrong way. So we've spent 1.6 million over 4 years. We're spending another 1.7 million on restoration along the riparian margins of the river, and what Councillor Sanson is seeking that we expand our thinking and become more holistic and think about what actually happens on the hillside around, because that is key to the sedimentation and the health of the river as well. And we did hear that from Peter and Joe today as well. So thank you for sharing that, and I look forward to working more closely with you on how we resolve environmental issues when sometimes there's only been a commercial lens cast over council operations. I have Councillor Laurie, then Glenys, did you have your hand up?
Madam Chair, we're just receiving a report. I don't think this is a time for debate.
If people wish to debate the report, that's absolutely fine with me. Yeah, I think Councillor Sanson was debating in support of receiving the report and looking forward to future work. So Councillor Laurie.
So I actually have a question, Madam Chair, it's okay. Did Councillor Sanson say that we only make $200,000 a year out of forestry?
I think that we're going to leave that now. If there's questions around Councillor Sanson's debate, we're going to leave that for a later date.
I'll put the recommendation. I'll put the recommendation that receive the chairman's report.
I'm just going to hear from Ms. Payne first. Thank you.
Oh, Madam Chair, it wasn't. I was a wee bit confused about what the conversation was. So this is not a debate, it's an observation. And I would say from a Māori perspective, it's encouraging to see a river that flows through a floodplain not looking like a drain for the most part. So I congratulate council staff on that.
Thank you so much. Glenys. Okay, so we're going to put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? No, that's carried. So we're going to move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the submissions. So it is pages 29 to 73. Submission to the National Environment Standards for Air Quality proposed amendments. And I'd like to invite, we have the two Richards here with us today. I'd like to invite you both to talk to your report first. Thank you.
Madam Chair and councillors, I just want to give a brief overview of the key elements of the report, and Richard is here to help answer any questions you may have around air quality monitoring or our behaviour change program. And then also, I welcome any questions you may have, because I appreciate there's quite a bit of especially technical information involved with the submission and the proposed changes to the NES re equality. First of all, I'd like to welcome the government's proposals, because they've been in the wings for some time now, being developed, and it's good to have an idea of the direction that the central government is making with the NES, because it has significant implications for our air quality management program and our plan provisions in particular, because we have to comply under the RMA with the NES. And I've acknowledged in our submission the incredible amount of work and serious commitment that the council has to the existing NES for air quality, and that's it's good to acknowledge that. In fact, it's quite clear that we're on track to meeting the existing NES requirements, and in the submission we raise concerns about the proposed changes and our ability to meet them. In particular, we engaged EnviroNet air quality scientist Emily Wilton, who's advised us previously. She's done our air emission inventories over a considerable number of years now, and she has provided a really good analysis of the implications of the proposed amendments to us. And I've attached her report to the draft submission, and it has informed the points made in the submission. First of all, I just cover off the key elements of the proposed amendments. So essentially, there's a new standard being proposed for PM 2.5 on an annual basis and a daily average. Our existing standard is around PM 10. So to help understand that, the size of the particles and the proposed changes, if you refer to page 48, there's a summary document of the government's proposals there, which sort of outlines what the significance of PM 2.5 versus PM 10. The amendments also propose a change in the wood burner standard. Currently, wood burners approved to be installed have an emission standard of 1.5 grams per kilogram, and the amendments are proposing to reduce that down to 1 gram per kilogram of emissions. And another significant addition to the standard is introducing or ratifying the Minamata Convention on Mercury. So there's some controls proposed around particular industrial discharges that involve mercury. And in essence, for our area, that involves coal-fired boilers. So I just briefly work through the main points in our submission, actually welcoming in principle the NES standards for PM 2.5. That's long been in the wings with the World Health Organization promoting it. And there are clear improvements in bringing in a PM 2.5 standard, because the smaller the particles, the greater the impact on human health. So that's one aspect of it. The other is it removes the larger particle size, which due to natural sources like sea salt, pollen, which we are find very difficult to manage that. So by focusing on human sourced particulate matter, which includes mainly combustion, it's more appropriate that we are able to have controls on that. So we welcome especially the annual average. However, EnviroNet have raised some significant concerns about how the daily average has been determined. In fact, in airshed A in particular, we are not likely to meet that. In fact, indications are we would need to have a reduction of 50% of emissions that they currently have to meet the proposed daily average for PM 2.5. And given the extent of work that we've done with regard to burner controls in particular, the implications for management of that would be essentially only allowing ultra-low emission burners and replacing our existing burner stock in airshed A with ultra-low emission burners. So that's a significant cost for homeowners to do that, and likely to raise quite a lot of concern in the community. So we're questioning or requiring the government to reconsider the PM 2.5 standard, also along with the World Health Organization guidelines. And how they've been determined has been questioned by Environet, to the extent that a more appropriate standard, rather than a 2.5 micrograms per cubic metre for Nelson, should be around 40 micrograms, 40 to 45 micrograms per cubic metres. So, and that's based on our current PM 2.5 standard, which is the rationale that the World Health Organization used. So happy to answer that a bit more further if any of the councillors have questions about that. Yeah, I think I'll leave it there. And if any of the councillors have questions, we could respond to those.
Do we have any questions? Councillor McGurk and then Councillor Courtney.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Russell. Yeah, I had a few questions through you, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
In terms of I was just looking, I had to read this for a few times to sort of get my head around it. But I'll just go back to, I think, paragraph, looking at 3.4, I think it is. Bear with me for a moment. A couple of ones,
Maybe, Councillor McGurk, maybe if you give people the page number and paragraph you're referring to, because it is quite a technical report. So just to take all the councillors with you.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at paragraph 5.7.
Of page 32?
Yeah, 32. Yeah, there's a couple of issues there. I was looking at the recommendation is that we endorse this submission to MFE. So that's the decision we've got to come up to do. And it's unusual in the fact that we've got a technical expert who's perhaps reasonably is critical on some of the criteria that's been proposed. So that's what I'm turning my mind to. So making sure that we understand, where the criticism is of the standards. So I'd look at paragraph 5. I'll start with 5.6 is the first one is that the rationale that's been proposed in by MFE doesn't seem to follow the rationale in the World Health Organization. What's that about? Can you explain?
Yes, I can. The World Health Organization guidelines came out in 2005, so that's some time ago now. When making decisions about a PM 2.5 standard, they can be adapted and shouldn't be any more stringent than an equivalent PM 10 standard. And they recommend, in the absence of any information about PM 2.5, that PM 2.5 daily average of 25 be recommended. However, we do have enough information about PM 2.5, especially in airshed A, where we've been monitoring it since around 2009, to be able to adapt that figure. So the equivalent for PM 10 of 50 for PM 2.5 standard, a daily average would be around 40 to 45, not 25 grams. Yep. So that's why we're not, in airshed A, we're not likely to meet that lower standard.
Okay, thanks. I'll carry on. The next question I've got is, can you explain the difference between the daily, what would be the impact of assessing of the daily average as opposed to the annual average? What's the likely impact on our compliance levels? Do you want me to?
Yeah, Richard might be able to best answer that.
I know that's sort of the recommendations to daily level, but Dr. Wilton in the report states the annual averages.
Just to give it a bit of context, the current standard is 50 micrograms of PM10 on a 24 average. And the good news is last winter, we didn't have one exceedance in any of our airsheds, which is the first time ever since we've been monitoring back in 2002. And touch wood, we haven't had any exceedances of that standard so far this year. And it looks like, according to Emily's report, we would be compliant with the annual average of PM 2.5 if it is adopted as recommended. But the daily average of 25 micrograms of PM 2.5, last year in 2019, we exceeded that 31 times. And this year to date, from 1 January to 22nd of July, we've had 21 exceedances of that proposed new standard, and we haven't even got through winter yet. So, and I don't know, we've got more winter to go, but it's looking somewhere in the order of, we would be exceeding it 30 to 40 times a year if that standard was adopted, and the allowance is a maximum of 3 exceedances a year. So it would give us considerable grief with trying to meet that standard.
Carry on. Next question, go down to paragraph 5.7. And I'll link it into the report, I think page 64 and 66 of Dr. Wilton's report. She says basically the reduction of the emissions from wood burner from 1.5 to 1 kilogram, which is making sort of the broad assumption, I think in the report, is that the recommendation is just a 1/3, but that wouldn't necessarily, can you help me explain what's the problem there? Because, because I understand that, basically it's a, their figure is 1 kilogram is 1/3 of 1.5, the difference.
That's right. Through the chair, when would that figure of 1.5 grams per kilogram comes from a test in a lab situation? In real life, the emissions are nowhere near that. And the other thing to note is most of the burners actually that have been authorised actually meet the 1 gram per kilogram standard anyway. So it's not a straight 33% reduction given from the test lab situation, and that is achieved in real life. So you can't make a sort of a reduction.
You can't make that
based on that. So that's just one of the faults that Dr. Wilton's picked up on in the analysis that's been done.
And the last question, if you indulge, Madam Chair, in terms of the cost benefit analysis, do we do dual testing for airshed A and B1? But if we adopt this, we'd have to get air monitoring equipment for.
Currently, we've got a modern air quality monitor in airshed A, Nelson South. We were monitoring both PM10 and PM 2.5, constantly. So we've got good data coming there. We would have to upgrade monitors in the other 3 airsheds, being Tahunanui, Stoke, and Nelson North, Central North. So we would have to do more monitoring. We are doing some PM 2.5 monitoring in Tahunanui with a very old monitor that is getting near the end of its life. So we will be up for upgrading our monitoring equipment to meet this new standard.
So there is a fiscal implication if this goes through in terms of capital costs.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're done? Okay. Councillor Courtney, then the Mayor, then Councillor Laurie, then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Richard and Richard. A couple of my questions have been answered. So I then go to my question that if this is adopted, What will be our approach to this going forward? What will you bring before us as an action plan to achieve what's wanting to be achieved in this particular report?
Through the chair, can I just reiterate, if the proposals are adopted as they are now, as I said, the implications for us are really that we wouldn't be able to comply in Airshed A in particular. So we would have to review our provisions in the area plan and bring in stricter regulations to bring the emissions down considerably. And we're already, I guess, just at the point where we're looks like we're complying with the existing NES. So, and that's come at quite a significant cost to council and to the community as far as the wood burner provisions in particular already. So it's going to be, it'll be a challenge meeting the PM 2.5 daily average standard. Looks like we'll meet the annual average, and especially in the other airsheds, it shouldn't be a problem. But the main concern really with the proposed amendments are around Airshed A, in particular the domestic burning component, which is the largest proportion of emissions in that airshed.
Are you optimistic that they'll relax their requirements? Because, you know, you're politely saying it's unrealistic, aren't you? You're just saying that it's plump and plain.
Yes, and a number of other councils have taken a similar approach. I understand that they're also challenging that daily average for 2.5. We're not alone in concerns.
In fact, sorry, through the chair, could I just add, yeah, a number of other councils are not in a strong position as we are, as meeting existing NES. So they're going to find it a lot harder than we are. So I guess they'll be making their views strongly known through the submission process.
You finished, Councillor Courtney? Mary, thanks.
Thank you through you, Madam Chair. Richards, I'm sure I was going to answer, and I'm sorry I was out of the room at the start of you presenting the paper. Thank you for the advice that other councils are also submitting similarly to us. I just wanted to get a sense of, in the regional sector, what is the position? Has this been up for to one of the SIGs for consideration? To special interest groups for consideration? Is there a collective regional council view on this?
There has been a series of phone conferences with the ministry, with groups of regional councils around the country. The appropriate SIG is the National Air Quality Working Group, and there is not a united submission coming from that sector. Although there has been sharing of some of the submissions and points of views from particular councils, but there isn't one submission and there hasn't been one overall opportunity to present that.
All right, so this follow-up question is, why is that? So why have we got differing views? Because what I'm really puzzled with here is why we've got a really significant piece of lead environmental standards work from the Ministry for the Environment that very well regarded air quality science is saying is not fit for purpose. And I want to understand how we get to this position, because it really doesn't seem to be appropriate that we as Nelson City Council are having to commission Emily Winton to go through this and do what is the peer review essentially of an NES that seems to be quite deficient or with some pretty drastic consequences if implemented the way it is. So I want to understand how we got to here, and if Emily's view is one view, but we have air quality scientists that hold an alternative view, and why.
I'm not sure through the chair that I'm able to answer that question. In fact, the concerns that the Mayor has raised are reflected in Emily Wilton's comments, and we've attached them to our submission. So the concerns about the approach taken certainly be raised through the submission process, but I can't comment on the process and why that MFE gone that way.
Through Madam Chair, maybe what I'll come back to is, so expert witnesses often disagree, okay? They sometimes disagree. Usually they can reach agreement on most things, and then there'll be some areas where there's different opinions. Are there different opinions to Emily's that are supporting other submissions? Because what we've got is, if we've got other regional councils are going, no, they think this is absolutely the right direction and it's supported by any equality scientist.
Through the chair, not aware of other opposing submissions. We are aware that a number of councils have also engaged Dr. Wilton to report their particular situation, like she has with ours, and we understand that those reports from Dr. Wilton express similar concerns that they've expressed as far as Nelson, and that those other councils are also attaching Dr. Wilton's report to their submissions as well. So there's a number of councils that are swinging from the same songbook, for want of a better term.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you raise a very good point in terms of the sector, the regional sector having a voice. I understand that we commissioned this jointly with Marlborough District Council as well as Tasman involved in it as well. So we were looking at it from that perspective. And it appears from what Richard has said that there aren't any other regional councils that are saying we support where the ministry has landed. But I think what it would be important for us to do is to make sure that we share this more widely, and I can do that through my RMG links in terms of contact.
If you could, through Madam Chair, Claire, if you could do that, I think that is really important, because I think what you're sorry, through Chair, because what I'm reading is that really we have got a proposal from the lead environmental ministry for New Zealand proposing something that is, in the case of Nelson, absolutely not fit for purpose, and actually would have consequences that would be not in the not support the well-being of this community and are actually just unattainable. So I'm a bit puzzled as to why these issues weren't ironed out before we start getting to the point of calling for submissions. But it's probably a question I need to ask the Minister for the Environment, which I may well do.
I could add through the chair that there have been ongoing conversations to this point with the ministry. So where they've landed is not reflective of those conversations that we've been having more broadly.
Okay. Councillor Laurie, you have a question. I'm aware that you've sent me an email asking if you can put up a photo. I'm not entirely sure we can attach photos to our questions, but maybe you could describe the photo.
I can hold it up. So this was taken on Monday morning of Airshed A. I was hoping to be able to stick it on the screen, and it didn't occur to me until we were sitting down that I actually had this photo, because I took it in a bit of a hurry leaving the house. But I don't know if any of you can see this, but it's soup, right? This is the view looking down on Airshed A at, I think, about 8:30 on 8:20 on Monday morning. So this soup is what the current air standards get us. Like, from what I'm hearing, what I've read, under the current rules, we're meeting them. But this is what we get. So my question is, if we don't, looking at the bigger picture, if we don't, and I appreciate, that we're being asked to do a whole lot, but if we don't make our air quality rules stricter, will our air quality, if we don't, will our air quality get better, or will it stay like that? I'm happy to email the photo to anyone who wants it.
Yes, through the chair, we've got many photographs like that over the years. The National Environmental Standard sets a standard set level that we are required to get underneath. The Nelson Air Quality Plan actually has both an aspiration and a goal of getting Nelson's air quality to 66% of that standard. So somewhat lower and that I guess will need to be considered when the air plan is reviewed, is whether that is still appropriate or not. So there is provision or requirement under the current Nelson Air Quality Plan for ongoing improvement. So just getting us to the NES 50 micrograms per cubic metre still doesn't meet the goal of the Nelson Air Quality Plan. It's a continuous improvement down to that. So there is currently a drive to keep improving air quality, not just stop, because the ministry and who have made it quite clear in past stuff that polluting up to that level, there's no safe level for air pollution. It's not a pollute up to, it's, you know, we want to keep improving it. So you're right to be concerned. To give it some context, when I said we haven't had any exceedances this winter, the highest level we've got, so current level 50, we've got to 42 on the 23rd of May. The second highest was 41 on the 7th of December, which was the Australian bushfires. And the third highest was on the 3rd of July, which we got to 40. So, you know, well below the 50. And you know, back in 2002, we were exceeding that 81 times every winter. We've got down to none last year. So we've got to where the government has required us to. We're not to where the air plan requires us to get to, and it's a challenge. You know, that level of pollution, a lot of health experts would say, is still undesirable.
I'm sure they would. Through the chair, if we go back in time to when we set those early goals, I'm thinking there were people then who thought, oh, this is going to be really hard to attain. This is really, you know, I don't know if it's feasible. Isn't that kind of the nature of progress? That we set ourselves targets, they're hard to meet. Sometimes we meet them, sometimes we don't. I'm concerned that not going down the tighter regulation track will lead to us sort of plateauing in terms of where we are in improving our air quality.
So through the chair, part of that conversation will also include what we want to do through the Nelson Plan. What we're signalling here, though, is that if this NES comes in, the community within Airshed A would be asked or required to significantly change what they do. And there is a significant cost associated with that. And we don't consider that the government has thought about that. So if you think about the program of change that this council's put in over the last, when was it that we did the air quality plan stuff, Richard? 10 years ago?
2008.
2008. And the significant cost that was required to get us to this point, you'd be asking the community to be doing at least the same, if not more, with where the government's going.
So my last question through the chair is, if we stick with the status quo and we're currently meeting those requirements, and the highway moves to the railway reserve, what will happen?
That would be need to be modelled. We are doing a piece of work called an emissions inventory that is near completion, which we will be bringing to council in the next few months once that is finished, plus associated with that projections of where we're at and where we're heading going forward, some projections. So that is a measure of the quantum of emissions into each year's shed and the sources and where they come from. We can only refer back to the 2014 one, which I think there's some diagrams in Emily's report that shows on page 68 that the PM, this is PM 2.5 because it's focused on that, not PM 10, but oh no, it's got both. Yeah. So if we look at PM 2.5 as a standard, is going to over a whole year about 65% is which is the green, is coming from domestic heating. The second biggest one is 15%, which is natural sources. So that's sea salt and dust entrained into the air and pollen and stuff like that. Then 10% is motor vehicles. 2% is industry, and 8% is other airsheds. So pollution doesn't recognise boundaries. So depending on the wind, we do get either drift of pollution from the north across into Victory, or sometimes from the south from Stoke across into Victory. So it does vary. What the quantum of whatever traffic changes are made, that would need to be modelled by experts to tell us what that answer is.
But through the chair, we know that it's safe to assume that at the current level, it's 10%, that number is going to significantly increase if diesel trucks go down the railway reserve day in and day out.
So through you, Madam Chair, I don't think that this is a question that Mr Popenhagen can answer. It would require expert advice, and we have not yet got that. So
through the chair, I don't think it requires an expert to say that if diesel trucks start going down the railway reserve, air pollution levels will increase.
I'm going to allow the question. I think Matt, let's just remember that Richard's role here is to talk about PM, about this report, and so I'll allow the question. And Richard, I do note in the report that it talks about motor vehicles in terms of brake and tyre wear components as well. So maybe you could just touch briefly on the effect of, if you have increased motor vehicles in an airshed, what the consequences of that is.
Okay, so I guess there's a number of aspects to that, and the first one is our pollution problem generally is in winter in that airshed, and in those times we get what's called an inversion layer, where we get a layer of cold air trapped under a layer of warm air, and all the pollution, just as your photograph shows, goes up, hits a level and gets trapped in a basin, and that is why our airshed boundaries are generally along the tops of ridges, because in those situations air pollution acts like water. It flows down the hills and ridges and accumulates at the lowest point in the valley. And so in that area, all the pollution ends up settling down in the bottom of the valley, comes from all those houses and that on the hill, and it comes from Waimea Road and the hospital and all that. So it's all draining down like water and pooling in that low point. So whether trucks are going up Waimea Road or St Vincent Street or around the hills, in those conversion layers, it all ends up puddling like a pool of water in the bottom. As far as the quantum, I'm not a traffic expert or anything like that. I will make the point that over time, vehicles have become more fuel efficient. Fuel has become better. And from research that I've seen, although our vehicle kilometres travelled have increased, the quantum of emissions from vehicles has dropped, although we're travelling further in vehicles, the total quantum. But again, the emission inventory will explain that a lot more, and it goes into not only exhaust emission, but tyre wear, brake wear, dust, all that sort of stuff. So that will come to you in a few months' time once we've had the final report presented.
Thank you. That's a really good summary. So a bit like ultra low emission burners, we're looking for more efficient car combustion and wear and tear on tyres and brakes. I think that was really helpful, and it was a great question. Thank you, Councillor Laurie. I just have a quick question, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Skinner with regards to the cost in terms of having to transition potentially to ultra low emission burners rather than our lower emission, so ultra low rather than normal burners that we have now. What was the cost to council when we did that initial phasing out, and what is the price difference at the moment of ultra low emission burners versus the wood burners which you could install, but now we're transitioning to that? So what was that cost of that previous phase in terms of council subsidising that scheme? And the average cost
through the chair. So it was called Clean Heat Warm Homes program, and it was an incentive program that had a number of legs to it, that was predominantly focused on assisting people that had an old polluting open fire or non-compliant old wood burner to replace that with either a compliant NES wood burner or a heat pump or another type of heating. And also, as part of that package, we also put money into insulating those homes, both in the roof and under the floor. The total cost to council, I understand, was in the order of about $14 million, which was quite a significant sum of money that council put into improving those houses and their heating things. And some of those people didn't have to pay anything. If they qualified for a rates rebate, essentially they didn't have to pay it back. We gave it as an interest-free loan, where some people had to pay back interest-free over 10 years through the targeted rate, but a lot of people, we covered the cost. So that's I guess the answer to your first question. Ultra-low emission burners did start off quite expensive, and as more have come on the market and it's become more competitive and a lot more being sold, they start at about $2,900 and the dearest one is about $7,000, but the large majority sit in that $3,000 to $4,000 mark. That includes a flue kit, which generally is about $800. So, and there are NES compliant burners that are in that similar price bracket. You can get slightly cheaper ones, but the difference has come down quite substantially.
Okay, so price is now comparable, but you'd be looking at having to go through a similar process, particularly with Airshed A, to become compliant with this.
So through you, Madam Chair, the council would need to make the decision as to how they were going to operate that in terms of making to achieve compliance. So what that program would look like would have to be considered by the council.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but when we're looking at the well-being of our residents in Airshed A, the air quality versus the cost to change the air quality is fairly significant. So I think that's quite helpful.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move the recommendation in the report if I could. Just I think it's very sound. So if that's right.
Yes. I'll have Ms. Payne seconding. And then I've got Councillor Skinner and then Councillor Edgar. And that hopefully is the end of questions. And we'll see if anyone has any concerns.
Thank you for that, because I know you guys have done a lot of work over a number of years and understand this intimately. Fog, I was a bit disappointed in the photo coming up, which when on glance of fogs, I hope we don't have to have a workshop on what fog's made up of. And I'd also point out there's plenty around the table who have wood burners but are not ultra low emission burners, but no one has put their hand up as to who has a burner. But when I first read this, I thought, why the heck are we giving us any airtime? Because from the report, none of it shows any health benefits on what's been proposed by the government sector. And like you said, we put a lot of work in achieving a lot of work and a lot of heartache for the public to achieve where we're at. And the public, I believe, are pretty happy in general where we've achieved. Why undo all that good work at great expense for no benefit? So in one sense, I was angry to see this report come in, but very happy to see it's been through quite a lot of detail and pointing out its shortcomings. So I'm at the point of, do I support this or don't support this? So what you're saying, if we don't put a submission in, then we will be out of that conversation to point out the lack of science and a lack of health gain that is being proposed. If we say no, we don't, there's a lot of nonsense that has been shown here. If we don't submit, then we're cut out of it, and it's more like a tick for what the government is proposing. Is that what I'm summing it up?
If I could just briefly respond. There are some good aspects of what's being proposed. I think generally, as I said before, PM 2.5 is a better measure regarding the health impacts. We're just questioning what the right figure is for a daily average. Certainly, we don't have any problems in supporting the annual average or moving to a PM 2.5. The other aspects of it are regarding the ratification of the Minamata Convention, which, although it doesn't have any serious implications for industry here, I think it's a good move to support that nationally. And also the submission gives us an opportunity to raise things like the authorisation of burners, which we do as a council and Environment Canterbury have done, and we'd be good for central government to take on that role. So there's aspects of our submission which I think are definitely worth making.
Okay, thank you.
So it's good to make the opportunity to do so.
I mean, I know we've done a lot of air quality testing, etc., and we've sort of able to work out what's coming from where and how, and it was an amazing science can be gained. The silver lining of the COVID lockdown, we had no vehicles during winter. Heat pump wood burners were in use, and yet the air quality improved dramatically with a lack of vehicles. So it seemed to point the finger fairly strongly that the
Point of order. Lockdown took place over the most beautiful, warm, sunny autumn we've ever had. So it's not irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
I'm just going to ask Councillor Skinner if you could just think about your question. Please, stick to the report.
If other councillors have an issue with difference between fog and smog and where pollution comes from, and then they can disagree with my opinion or my science assessment, but they can't say a point of order and say, no, I don't agree with you, so don't open your mouth.
Councillor Skinner, I think the point of order was raised around the fact that
it was a sunny winter and
that it wasn't winter time during lockdown. So I will uphold the point of order that it was not winter during lockdown. Okay, could you please just stick to the questions? And I think Councillor Laurie had his photo validated and verified by the staff. So let's just leave the photo. That was his question. Stick to your question.
Well, I'll put the staff to validate that photo as being all soup. If you've said they validated, I didn't get that validation. No, I don't like having to put people on the spot there because
we only saw just a brief glance of a photograph on the cell phone. We would need to see it in more detail.
Correct. So, point of order to you, Madam Chair, and saying they validate something they didn't validate something.
I'm just going to adjourn for a minute. I just want to talk to the governance advisors.
This is going a bit haywire.
So if everyone can come back to the table, please. I'm not going to uphold Councillor Laurie's point of order, but I would like to request that councillors remember our our values and the way we ask questions and talk about other people's questions during their question time, if we could be respectful of each other and just remember that everyone has a different way of raising concerns. Councillor Skinner, you have every right to raise your concerns, but I would like to hear from staff as to whether during lockdown we had a significant number of log burners burning or not, in terms of clarifying Councillor Skinner's question around that. Did we have a high number of log burners burning during the lockdown period?
During level 4 lockdown, it was very mild, and there wasn't, didn't appear to be many people using wood burners. And certainly it's really difficult to look at very short-term things as far as air pollution, because there's so many effects. There's meteorological conditions that varies markedly, and just to give it some context, although we've had some, readings up around the 40s in May and June, 2 days last week it was down to 4 on the 16th and 18th of July. Middle of winter, people were still using their wood burners, but because of meteorological conditions, wind and rain, so it is all over the place. And in fact, in Te Hunanui, the week preceding level 4 lockdown, we actually had our third highest reading for the whole previous 12 months, which was the week before lockdown. And that's just how things can get skewed if you compare that with the following week of the first week of level 4 lockdown, because that occurred in very strong, dry southwesterly winds, which we often get, exceedances like that. So it's better to look at longer term averages, because it smooths out those weekly and daily fluctuations that can really give you a false picture of what the reality is.
Thank you so much. Councillor Skinner, do you have one more question? In terms of a question, if you want to debate, then could you leave it to debate? But if you have a short question.
If I make a comment, and that's been my debate.
We're still on questions. I think that I have Councillor Edgar, so then you can come back to debate. I would prefer that you saved your conversation for debate. Thank you. So Councillor Edgar.
Thank you for that. Yes, so my concerns actually mirrored the Mayor's, and it would appear that MFE has sort of undermined their own process and recommendation through a lack of scientific evidence to support some of the areas within the NES. Just what peer review process is required before something like this comes out to the draft stage? Because I would personally think that it should be scientifically robust when an NES or NPS from any ministry comes out. And so just wondering, what is the peer review process around that?
Just to clarify, through the chair, do you mean the peer review process undertaken by MFE?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know the answer to that. It appeared it may not have happened particularly well in this case.
If I could just briefly comment through the chair. In our submission, I referred to when the the current NES was developed, there was a tag of technical advisory group that was formed as part of that process, and that clearly didn't happen this time round. So that's one of the statements that we're making in our submission, is maybe to have a reconsideration and go through that process a bit more thoroughly. I don't know if it's a requirement, but it's usual practice, I think, for the ministry, and I can't comment on why they didn't go through that this time around.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we don't have any more questions, I'm going to see if the Mayor would like to speak to it first, as she moved it, then Ms Payne as a seconder, and if anyone else wishes to debate. Councillor Skinner, I have you down to debate as well, and Councillor McGurk. So I'll hear from.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak very briefly to this item, because I think through the course of the questioning we've identified some of the gaps in this NES. There's some good points, and there are some points that obviously are not supported by the scientific evidence. It disappoints me that we are
receiving an NES that is not in what I consider to be a publicly robust and scientifically robust frame for bringing to the public and to local government. And I think Mr. Rozelle is absolutely highlighted the importance of development stages of policy and environmental standards, that there is enormous value in engaging with the local government sector and scientific sector when we're looking at these matters and doing some collaborative work to make sure that when NESs come out, that they actually are going to deliver the outcomes that are intended. And in this case, I think we can see that they don't in many instances. I don't think this needs a long debate. I think what we should be saying in relation to this matter, I want to say it very strongly, is this is what demonstrates that Nelson is the smart little city. And we're not very big. We're a tiny little unitary authority. But boy, we've got some smart people working for us who've done some smart work over many decades. And I am very grateful to them, because the difference that they have made to the environment and wellbeing in Nelson is absolutely significant, and they're committed to ensuring that that continues. So thank you to the staff team.
Ms. Payne.
Thank you. I just like to say I have some experience with the development of the Nelson E plan and the aspirational nature of that plan, and well done there. Apart from that, I would echo Madam Mayor's comments on the surprise that I have in the robustness scientifically of the MFE report, but still support the recommendations.
Thank you. Next, I'll hear from Councillor Skinner, then Councillor McGurk, then Councillor Laurie.
Not much to add. I mean, I support what we've got in the report there. I have concerns if we're sort of looking at the 2.5, but the annual measurement rather than the daily, I support on that. And we've made some great gains there, and always be conscious of the bigger picture. We're not trying to we shouldn't be trying to create hardship for industry building with burners, or hardship for those who benefit from heating their homes. And sometimes when we're trying to improve air quality in a whole, sometimes it's I can see the ministry environment is sort of picking easy targets, which often is the resident rather than the industry or commercial, and that's where we can make great gains. So as you can understand, I'm very protective of the ability for people to heat their homes cleanly and efficiently, and that's what we've made some great gains on that, and I want us to continue to support doing that. But let's not complicate things and trying to have some sort of ideology and make it hard with negative gains. But the report, I think, points it out very clearly. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and Madam Chair. And there's not much really though I can add to what is already said. I'll speak in support of the recommendation that the report that our submission does go to MFE. It's based on expert scientific evidence from Dr. Wilton, and it has been peer reviewed. So I think the analysis that's been carried out is robust and puts us in a good position. It is disappointing that the proposal has come to us in such a, I have to say, undercooked fashion. If we're going to do this, and this is about improving air quality for all our citizens and improving their health, if we're to do it, it's to be based on good scientific research and evidence. And I find that the submissions that, the proposal that came out from MFE was found wanting, and I think we've probably done this, done MFE a service by actually highlighting those particularly technical issues. So that's really all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor McGurk. Councillor Laurie, then Councillor Edgar.
Thanks very much. 16 years ago, I did a night of football training down at Victory Square. Didn't live in the area at the time. I travelled from above the wood to be there. Ran around all night, got home, I was in the shower, I started coughing. It's only 16 years ago. And this black gunk started coming up from my chest. Now, I smoked a packet a day for 11 years. And for 3 of those years, I lived in a big polluted city in Japan. And I had never seen the stuff that was coming out of my lungs that night coming out of my lungs. So the air quality only 16 years ago in airshed A was terrible in winter. And we forget that it was one of the most polluted airsheds in the country. This is in, clean green Nelson. So I think that the way we have cleaned up our air in Nelson really has been the achievement, arguably, of a generation. It is a fantastic thing. And one of the issues that we face is because we have so many people coming to live in Nelson, they don't know that. A lot of people in Nelson don't appreciate how bad things were and how far we've come. So I'm going to support the recommendation because I'll always support council's right to question government policy. But I also have to say that it is so important that we do not rest on our laurels, that we keep going forward, that we insist on air quality improving all the time, because things could still be better for all of us. And I just also have to say that the real problem, I think, is the cost of electricity in this country. And we were told by Max Bradford, how many years ago, he was on the Holmes show, I saw him, the minister at the time, and he said that deregulating electricity would provide cheaper power to New Zealanders. I think we all know that hasn't happened. And if it was actually cheaper for people to warm their homes, we wouldn't have the air problems that we've got.
Thank you, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Edgar.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'd like to speak in favour. I just wanted to thank the staff for their depth and detail and the expertise that they've put into this, supplemented by the additional work from Dr. Milton. And it is disappointing that, across 11 regional councils and 6 unitaries, that we've all had to input so much staff time and additional cost into this because the ministry hasn't done their homework. While it's great that we've got some amazing staff and again it's been supplemented, it shouldn't be our role to ensure that proposed NESs or NPSs come to us without good peer review and good scientific data. And it's unfortunate that so much staff time and cost has had to go into this, but I thank them for that.
Just going to speak really briefly in support of the submission, and I also want to thank the staff. It's a really sound submission that you've prepared and very thorough, and has, as other councillors have mentioned, has focused in on the issues and how we fix the issues, and looked carefully at the science, and also looked at Nelson as we do lead the country. I know we're far ahead of other cities around the country in terms of taking air quality seriously. So how would this standard affect us? I think it's important to note that the cost of ultra low emission burners has come down, and were we having our time again and investing that 14 million, if we'd had that kind of technology at the time, then we probably would have been pushing those through at that price. I think I recall you can have 4 ultra low emission burners for every 1 NES burner, so the opportunities to spread those fires into more homes is one that we would have probably taken up had we could have then, but we were leading the country and we did the best we could with the technology we had. I think that there's opportunities to improve, as Councillor Laurie said. Airshed A has been significantly polluted for decades. I remember growing up in Nelson, and it was very noticeable if you move from the hills down into that valley, how bad the pollution is. And as an asthmatic, pollution affects you instantly. The fires affected me significantly last summer, so we can always do more to improve our air quality. And I think Councillor Laurie is also right in terms of energy costs. That is a big barrier to people turning on heaters or turning on heat pumps rather than burning wood, which they can often source for free. So hopefully that changes a little bit into the future as we look at how we resolve some of the issues around energy costs. And it's a great submission and actually really good debate, everyone. Please remember and good questions. Please remember to just try and be respectful of your colleagues during their and give them their chance to ask their questions. So I'm going to put the recommendation. All those in favour? If not, anyone against? Okay, great. And that is the end of public.
I'm happy to move us into excluded.
You'd like to move us into public excluded? It'd be quite good to be at lunch by 1 o'clock, wouldn't it?
And I think we've just got the one item.